Okay, there we go, man. We're rolling.
Fantastic.
Brendan, thanks for being on, man.
Oh, of course, man. It's a pleasure to get to talk to you.
Yeah, I think I was like super attracted to your page because I saw you on Dr. Jen's you were on Dr. Jen's podcast.
Yeah.
And then I just took a look at your Instagram, and on one of your stories shortly after I followed, you put something about how you'd never voted Republican in your life.
Yeah.
Like you just went down the list, but you were super honest with your thoughts and feelings and all the different things. Like you were putting out points that people would have pointed at and been like, "Oh, that's a conservative all the way."
Yeah.
And
Oh,
then
for sure.
and then you said that I was like, "I like this guy. This guy is rad right here."
Yeah. It's been a wild year or so, man. And I've just I got to tell you, I've been on Instagram for I don't even know, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years or something, right? And then maybe longer. And honestly, barely used it, hardly used it at all. And then something about being stuck at home, man. And I was like, how do I reach out to people? How do I help in this time? Especially once like the country shut down. I was like, this is weird. And I was I just moved across the country. I didn't know anybody. So I was like, how do I reach out to folks? And then what's the most helpful thing to do? And I would say in almost every situation, the most helpful thing always is tell the truth, right? As constantly and as often as possible. Even if it's painful truth, joyful truth, even if you're just saying things that you find truthfully funny, just all of that can be super helpful. And yeah, I've just tried to kind of do that nonstop, and it's been very interesting to see who doesn't like to hear that at all, doesn't want to hear your truth, my truth, doesn't want to hear any truth, or it certainly doesn't want to hear anything capital T truth. But then a lot of people are like psyched. I think it's very comforting as a community to see people who are like, here, I thought it was this, but also I'm this. And I always want to share too, like when I change my mind about stuff on social media. I think that everyone thinks that's some sort of myth that anyone ever changes their mind. You're not going to change anyone's mind. And I was like, dude, I've spent way too much time online researching things over the past year and a half, 2 years, and I change my mind 2 to 3 times a week. Maybe not giant, entire repentance 180-degree shifts or anything, but like certainly subtle angles and like, oh, okay, I had this presupposition, chuck that one out. And so I was like, let's talk. But I saw a lot of people online, at least anyway. This is like where most of my world is, most of my community, sadly. A lot of people weren't doing that. A lot of people were just kind of getting, I think maybe in fear or anxiety, they just became more and more entrenched. And I saw people I've known for years be like super bullying about all sorts of stuff that I was like, wait, this is like brand new narrative and you're being mean. So I was like, let's be honest, guys. There's no trying to sum people up in these little packages and then abusing those packages. You're making straw men. You're like committing a logical fallacy about the whole world. So yeah, I just try to be as honest as possible. And man, I just started following politics really in the past 2 years. Why did I do that? What is wrong with me? This seems like the worst time ever. Maybe it's always this bad, and I'm just like, what happened to the world? So I'm trying to leap in and be a peacemaker, man. Be like, I get you. I'm an actor, man. You know what I mean? So my whole job is observing people's behavior and trying to like ascertain like where people's perspectives are and whatever. Textual analysis has been my like life's work. And so like trying to read stuff and get where people are coming from. It's like, I should be able to pretty much understand anyone. I can understand a genocidal maniac or a Karen down the street or literally somebody without a thought in their head.
Yeah, well, it's something so freeing about what you said about uh, being able to say when you were like you've changed your mind on something, like you find
Yeah.
different evidence. There's something so freeing about being honest with that and being it's okay that you were wrong in this idea and to switch it up, and then you realize, oh, now I can really find out what the truth is. I can just like it's freeing. It's like, oh, okay, I can do that
Yeah.
anything I want.
Isn't it? It is. It's a really nice liberation. So I was raised like half. My mom was like a born again Christian when I was in her womb, and so I grew up kind of mostly with my mom, but I spent a lot of time with my dad. And my dad is an atheist. Although if God exists, he totally hates him. He would shoot him in the face if he could. And so like I kind of grew up and both of my parents are like nonconformists, not highly suggestible people. Question everything kind of people, and that's how they raised me to be. And so I constantly have questions, certainly, I mean, from both the Christian and the like sort of darkly comedic humanist side, I've questioned myself constantly. You know what I mean? I've reckoned with my own darkness and my own motives, and I'm like, and then because of that, I have no problem like looking at other people and being like, come on now, we all pretty do messed up stuff sometimes, right? And then when did it ever become normal to not be like, hey, I make mistakes, I mess up, I even make mistakes on purpose, so those aren't even mistakes. I literally have done mean things in my life. I've done wrong things in my life on purpose. So then, I mean, come on, we've all done those things. You know what I mean? And so it's very weird to me that this sort of thing of just like, oh no, I'm in the tribe that does nothing wrong. I was like, where did this come from? This, like, as far as I knew, that didn't even really exist outside of like fiction, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very true statement. Like in you following politics, that seems like all it is now is like you're one side, you're the other, you're one side, you're the other. Like
Yeah,
if you say one thing, you're automatically in this camp, and I've been accused of it many a time, and I'm like, why are you saying that? That's
yeah,
not what I believe at all. Like, did you look
yeah,
at anything else that I've done or said? No, but I saw this, and I go, yeah, because I thought that was correct. Like that's
yeah.
that's why I did that.
That,
Like,
that's that. Yeah. Well,
yeah,
it's very funny. Yeah, that there's some sort of assumption, I guess, of like A equals B through Q or whatever. There's just an immediate like tumble down of only blanks, think that, or only blanks think that way. And some of it you can be like, oh, they got that from the news or whatever. And other times I'm like, I don't even know where people get it from. They get it through the air or they hear it, some sort of cultural osmosis when they're like, yeah, they've heard two or three things about it. And they're like, oh, but I only heard that in the context of whatever, Trumpers or MAGA people or whatever,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
which is
Well,
it's weird.
the craziest thing, I guess I'll just jump right into this thing is
Yeah.
the mask situation with children in schools and all of that
Yeah.
stuff, and the amazing just hatred that you can see online and from people
Yeah.
like when you were saying you saw people doing things and saying things, you're like, wow, I don't know, where does that hatred come from? Like, I know you're not that person.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
see it all the time. Like, we are friends with people, like we walk around, we see it, but then you'll see things online, you go, that's not you. Like, what is that? What comes out? And it's like,
Yeah.
it's not even science based or factual based or anything, and it just pops out and you
No.
go, wow, that's incredible. Like,
Yeah.
why the hatred? But this
Yeah.
mask thing seems to bring it up big time in schools,
Yeah.
and that's really, like, I wanted to hear and get your thoughts on all of that and how you came to start researching all this stuff that you did for children's schools and the mask and all that stuff.
Oh yeah. Well, honestly, I moved across country. I've lived in Los Angeles for about 20 some odd years. It's the longest I've lived anywhere. And moved across the country in February of 2020 to North Carolina. On the way across, stopped at Meow Wolf in Santa Fe, which if you're ever in New Mexico, go to Meow Wolf. Fantastic. Can't even explain it. It's like a museum. It's like a festival sort of immersive environment that they had time enough to build and leave it there. It's amazing. Anyway, enjoyed that. Somewhere that night, that next morning, had intense like respiratory symptoms of some sort. Coughing so bad I literally couldn't. I was having trouble catching my breath. So I traveled across almost the entire United States with a mask on my face, in the car, sleeping a ton, missing most of this road trip I've been looking forward to for half a year. Um, we get here. So at that point, I'm just like, all right, you just stick a mask on your face. Never really thought much about it. I tested positive for influenza B. Who knows? Could have been other things. We'll never know. Just was coughing my face off and not breathing very well. Eventually, everyone in the car got it. The kids were fine. My wife was kind of sick for like 2 days or whatever. But anyway, so I'm wearing a mask across the country, right? I have no opinions about masks. Who does? Like, who in the United States 2 years ago had any opinions about masks whatsoever? Then all of a sudden they start floating this thing of like, oh, we should start wearing masks. Maybe we should make people do it. That kind of became a little cultural conversation. What was that, March or April or something? We moved just in time, basically 3 weeks before the whole world shut down. And then I was reading an NPR article, I think in April, maybe 2020, that just said, there's not a lot of science on masking. In fact, there are no conclusive RCTs, the gold standard of scientific proof on the subject. And I was like, I love NPR, by the way. Total NPR nerd. Listen to too many of their podcasts. That's my jam. Music, news, all of it. And I was like, NPR, that sounds weird. That just sounds weird to me. That like masks have been around since, as far as I knew, like plague doctors, you know, with the long beaks and stuff. So I was like, it's been around for hundreds of years, certainly since 1918 flu, right? So nobody ever like did a whole test on this. That seems weird. So I just started literally just Googling. And within 15 minutes, I found 3 RCTs. So I was like, wait a second, that's weird. Like, why would NPR be wrong about that? And then if they did, why wouldn't they mention this? And then that made me it made me feel very like paranoid. And I was like, well, let me just keep looking. And then I just kept looking. And then I kept seeing it. I saw it like 2 or 3 other times in other articles saying there's nothing out there. And at that point I was like, okay, this is straight up weird that everyone's saying there aren't. Wall Street Journal, New York Times, I can't remember one other place, and NPR, all saying that there were no studies on this. There are dozens and dozens and dozens over decades. So it made me a little paranoid, a little bit of a paranoid person. I was like, this seems really weird. Like, why would they be saying there aren't things that there are? Anyway, that led me down a long rabbit trail. Ended up reading over the next year or so, read about 80, 90, almost 100 studies at this point, just everything I could, because I was like, I just want to know all about this, because I don't want to be one of these people who is like, yeah, but I think it might not be true if I don't like have my ish together. Like if I haven't like, let me make sure. I'm going to try to find everything. And at some point I got so paranoid that I was like, okay, they have to be saying this for a reason. So let me just keep digging. And eventually I'm going to find the thing. And this is going to be why. And after 40 studies, I couldn't find it. After 50, 60, 70, still couldn't find it. And eventually I was like, oh, this is spurious, right? This isn't actually based on anything. This is some sort of weird narrative, tribal sort of something going on. I don't know. Maybe it's just paternalistic. So honestly, by the time the whole school thing came around, I was a little bit locked and loaded of like, okay, whoa, hold on a second. We have very little information. It's all low confidence science in terms of advising masking at all, other than sticking an N95 in your face for like a whole day. I was like, all right, then if you said that, it's still a maybe, but it's a solid maybe. But anything else for the population doesn't have a lot of heft behind it. It's got actually more evidence to the contrary. So when they started doing it to kids, I was like, well, wait a second. Now we're being like, this goes beyond just being incautious. And I don't mind, and it came from having children too. I don't mind harming myself or like doing something stupid. P.S. I love masks. I love wearing masks. I didn't have to buy a single mask for this pandemic. I did just because I wanted to, because fashion is fun. I love wearing masks. I love them. I have literally 15, 16 of them. This is my jam. So I was elated at that. But with my kids, I was like, well, hold on a second. It's different if I'm going to experience some, like, I'm going to participate in some weird stuff with society. There's some segregation aspects here that I don't appreciate. But I was like, once you're going to ask me to impose that on someone else, I was like, that's totally different. Like, that's different to me between like someone like pushing me at a party, in a bar, someone punching me in the face. I can kind of take that. I actually don't mind. I've done enough fighting. I kind of like being punched in the face. That's fine. Maybe 2 or 3 punches and I'm going to try to kill you. But you punch me in the face, that's like a bit of a problem. But if you punch my kids in the face, I'm going to kill you. You know what I mean? Like it's 0 to 60. Even you punch a stranger in the face. There's no second chances at that point. That's maybe just partially because I'm a man and I believe men are called to a certain level of protection just by being the sort of larger gender in the species, as well as a host of other reasons. And so when it came to kids, I was like, okay, no, we need to be like triple, quadruple serious on that. And the lamentable thing is, it was done incautiously from the beginning with adults, then deeply incautiously with children, because we have to assume the negative stuff that happened with adults throughout mask wearing trials, because I'd already read all the RCTs and there was adverse effects in a bunch of those. So with kids, we have to assume just based on their lungs and capacity for breath, as well as they have in some ways stronger immune systems, but we also know from sending kids to school, that first week of school, every kid comes home sick with something, right? So we also know it can harm them. So that just got me, I think, probably doubly inflamed than I was about adults, because I was like, even more so. We're supposed to be protecting children. And now we're a year and a half in and people are still being mean and crazy about it, when there's one side that has like a little bit of evidence, 5, 6, 7 studies, a bit of real world evidence. And then on the other side, this is the side that says voluntary masking. Wear a mask if you want to. And then on this side, there's mandatory, you have to wear it. And there's literally nothing. There's nothing. There's nothing. No one can find anything. My school board couldn't provide anything. My principal for my kid's school can't provide anything. New York Magazine's David Zweig researched it for months. He couldn't find anything. There's no reason to believe that it's doing anything, but people are still animated, like furious, right? And people, legal cases and protests, and people are fighting. People are scrapping outside schools. You know what I mean? Parents are like shoving each other around about this stuff. And I was like, and it's based on what? I mean, it's literally based on just literally what someone told me. Which,
Yeah.
I mean, my goodness gracious. I don't even care what they said. Even if someone said something true, you're going to do it just because someone said it? Like, oh, who are you? I didn't do that when I was a rebellious punk, like 8-year-old, like, let alone as an adult. You know what I mean? Unless someone's literally like shark swimming to the shore. Sure. Maybe I'll swim. Maybe I'll swim in.
maybe you'll hit it if it's
maybe. I won't wait. I might not wait in that circumstance. But 18 months of fleeing a shark I've never seen, that's on me.
Yeah, there you go. That's on you. Yeah, it's very true. So, when I reached out to you, I don't get fired up about anything. I stay out of the politics and, school systems and everything. Like, hey, I'm responsible for when my kids come through the door and teaching them what, I think is truthful and right and, lessons in life. It's not the school's part. I think if you rely on that, you're going down a wrong path anyway. And so that's the way I always viewed it. But then I'm forced to watch this entire long school board meeting because I hear there's some sort of shenanigans going on here in Texas. They have the law and the mask are like, you can't make people wear masks or anything. But then there was 20 something people. It wasn't on the agenda at all. And these two board members of the school, I guess, coordinated with a bunch of people, and they took 20 something people in there, and they all stood up and talked about how we should go against the governor's order and just mask our kids and force them. Are we going to do what's right? And then a couple of them were doctors, and a couple of those doctors do not live by anything they said up there. I've seen them around, and they don't wear masks. They go right up to people. They are, and that infuriated me when I saw them start talking about it. I was like, hold on a second. I know you don't do the same thing that you are saying you want my kid to do. Yeah. And that seems totally wrong to me. And that's when I got all fired up and I got like angry. I'm going, wait a second. I'm for everybody having the choice to do all of these things if they feel like they need to protect themselves. Yeah. But if I don't see the evidence and I don't want to mask my kids, why do I have to? And no evidence base at all in anything like you just said. It was just basically stand up there, recite the cases of infection, and then say, if we mask them, it will stop this. And you go like, how? And then there's nobody's providing an answer. And so I asked you for, if you had any studies, and then you just bombarded me with all of these studies, and I'm like reading them all, and I'm going like, this is so amazing. Like you had those at the drop of a hat.
Yeah, it's so funny too because I for the longest time I was sharing these things for a long time. And some of my friends just told me to stop talking about masks early on. I'd only read like 5-6 studies. And I was like, guys, this is really weird. I would never think this, but check this out. And people were like, don't talk about it, which I thought was super weird. And there's this sort of sense that maybe this plays into to what happened at your meeting, but there's a sense of like immediate narrative that people, I think maybe in terms of fear, I'm trying to be empathic about it, in terms of fear and anxiety, they just grabbed onto authoritative declarations of blank. Kind of a little bit of a mommy, daddy, save me thing, to be a little bit condescending, but it's a little true. And so anyone who said an authoritative something of this is what's going to stop the pandemic, this is what's going to keep you safe, people were like, okay, mommy, daddy, and they grabbed it and they stuck it on their face. And they kind of didn't want to hear anyone saying anything bad about their mommy and daddy, or they didn't want you to, it was kind of like my kid has done this and kind of gotten a little bit of trouble about it, like talking to other kids about how Santa Claus isn't real. and people get a little swirly. And I was like, kids talk about everything. I mean, you know what I mean? And the same kid who says Santa Claus isn't real be like, there's a monster who lives under my bed. You know, he looks like a crocodile. You know what I mean? I mean, they're kids. They're going to talk about whatever they want. They're going to fight about whatever they want. If they're arguing about things verbally and sticking to that, I mean, that's great for kids, like, you know, logic bases. But people, yeah, very, very early on, just kind of got this thing of like, this is just what will save us. And honestly got really irritated if anyone even brought up that you should kind of ask questions or kind of go, oh, okay, well, how do you know that? That it seemed insulting, basically, that it's like, well, I believed my mommy and daddy, and if you don't believe me about what I said my mommy and daddy thing, then I don't like you and you're a stupid face. It's pretty much what's occurred, you know? And for anyone who's just like, again, I'm conservative in some ways, I am liberal in other ways, and in many ways I'm probably like most bent towards, like, I'm a Christian, but I'm like a Christian classic liberal, and that I don't feel like the government is really supposed to be regulating quite a number of things that they, you know, that other people might want them to. So I kind of do want people to at least like legally be able to live how they want to live. That's like a classic liberal position. So I want people to, even if they have crazy superstitions, if someone's really afraid of vampires every October and they send the kid to school with garlic cloves around their neck, cool. All right, whatever. I may think that's crazy. It's in a different realm altogether if they're like, and then they brought garlic cloves for all the children and all the children have to wear them. And I was like, that's a really strange imposition. To me, that's an equal, I think would be equally inappropriate if I were to be like, well, since masks don't work and we know cloth masks have some association in a random control trial, the gold standard of scientific proof, with being conductive of infection. And we do have some anecdotal evidence that masking in schools leads to more infections. It's actually more reasonable for me to suggest kids should not mask. You should not be allowed to mask your children. But I'm not in favor of that, personally. I'm like, hey, if you want to wear one, if it makes you feel copacetic, I don't want you lying to your kids. But my kids are going to tell the truth. Your kids are going to tell the truth, both as they understand it. They're kids. But I was like, I don't think anyone should be imposing. And since we already have the data that voluntary masking and mandatory masking, there's no difference or slightly increase of infection harm, then I'm just like, let's go with that. That's the beautiful compromise. No one's ripping any masks off kids' faces. No one's sticking any masks on kids' faces. We're letting kind of kids be kids and letting parents ultimately govern what this is an issue of. This is the sort of ideology. We as parents are shaping the ideological constructs or presuppositions of our children, right? I mean, ultimately, school can teach them a bunch of facts and teach them how to think and how to interact. But like you said, like, we as parents are responsible for the foundation, for the genuine foundation of like right and wrong, real, not real, you know? And then we guide our children in that way, and then we slowly start letting them go and figuring it out for themselves. But like, that's a parent's job. And honestly, not just a job. I don't mean it in a bad way. I like working, but like, it's a joyful obligation, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And it also, I think one thing that it does when they see their parents acting the way they're doing about this thing is it, just like you were taught to question everything, I'm the same way, is to look at everything and question it. I have a little bit of a punk rock thing in me, like, I don't know that's true. Like, let me test that out, you know, and when I find out something's wrong, I think it happens when you find out something you've been told or believed in so long. Like, I saw something and I was like, oh, that's not right. I go, well, what else is out there that's not right? So then then I start questioning everything that I see. Like, well, is that true? Does it make sense? Is it passing the BS meter that I'm seeing in my head too? But the kids are going to lose that ability because they're just going to follow with adamant guidelines, black and white. This is the way we are. This is what we have to believe because mom and dad said, you know, but they don't ever say because mom and dad said when they get older. They just say, this is the way it is. And you go like, where'd you hear that?
Yeah. And then I mean, I guess to me, since again, like I said, I grew up like in a Christian household dominantly. I've had arguments about the fundamental truths of existence with certainly my dad throughout my whole life, other kids all the time think what my family believes is weird, and even what I've believed is weird. And I mean, that's attacking when people are like, that's malarkey, God doesn't exist. I mean, that's attacking something so much more fundamental than anything we wear or anything in government that we listen to. But you know what? I've never responded. Actually, I don't even know anybody who's ever responded as adamantly, as angrily, as spittle flying from the mouth as this masking thing. We're talking about like fundamental truths. So in some ways, maybe I'm advantaged in that like I grew up that way, kind of thinking differently than the world I was surrounded by. So then you're like, all right, well, I'm used to questioning everything, and people are constantly questioning me. So then I'm constantly having to go, yeah, why do I think that? I better not just think that just because my mom and dad do. I better have a good answer, you know. And I like arguing too, my whole life, pretty much. Um, so in that way, I've always been like, all right, I got to get my sources straight. You know what I mean? And I have to refine my argument too, in case I'm wrong. Like you said, like when you find those moments, you're like a little bit. It stings a little bit because you're like, oh, you feel kind of like a dumbass. But then you're also like, okay, well, we're all dumbasses sometimes, and this is going to happen to me many times in my life. I'm going to be wrong about things. Like for a long time, for me, it was about I was wrong about girls or whatever. Oh, I thought she hated me. Oh, she actually liked me. On the one I thought liked me. Oh, she actually thinks I'm disgusting. She likes my friend or whatever. You know what I mean? Like we have, and these are, I just bring those up because those are very powerful emotional moments
Yes, they are.
For a young man's life. And they shape you. You're like, oh, I got to be careful. And I think I changed schools a lot when I was growing up. Went to changed schools 11 times before I graduated high school. And in some ways that was really helpful. So I can be a little bit flexible and think like a bunch of different people and that sort of thing. It was helpful as an actor, but it also in some ways, I feel like I miss social cues, not having grown up, like been socialized by a similar group for a long amount of time. So I need to talk things out. I need things to be explained to me. I need to like reckon things with words. Those are very important for me. Me trying to guess as to like, oh, maybe they think that because of this and that. And I'm just like, let's just talk about it. That's way safer to me. And I'm not going to make any mistakes or like you were talking about BS meter or whatever. I was like, I don't have that great a one. I married someone who does. So that's like super helpful. So it's like, she gets the like, she's like, I'm getting crazy vibes. And I was like, really? I had no idea. And I was like, yeah. Oh yeah. No, they've been on coke for like 3 hours at this party. Did you not know? I was like, I just thought they were chatty. You know, they're like, no, that's he's on a dark path, man. I was like, oh, all right. So it's been weird in that way too, trying to like kind of figure out not only the vibes as well as like let's talk it out. And a lot of people don't even want to talk. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to address it. They don't want anything. And that riles me up a little bit, but also it worries me because I feel like this is our fundamental way to communicate, especially when we were stuck at home for like months and months where we weren't supposed to be around each other. It's like, all right, well, let's use our words. Let's use our typing fingers. Let's speak this out, man. Let's talk to each other and not just be like, here's what I think. Okay, well, I think this. Well, that means you're this. Well, what happened? We didn't get 3 sentences in, you know? Yeah. But if we lose that capacity, then that's dangerous, not just now, that's dangerous like forever. Like that's dangerous, and not just for us, but for our children. You know what I mean? Like we don't want a world where like kids can't just be like, I don't agree with that. People are like, what? Away with you. You know what I mean? To the gulag. You know what I mean? What? No. Like we all need to reckon with this and all be kind of wrong and kind of right and whatever. Figure it out.
Yeah, you said earlier, like children need to it's good for children to disagree.
Yeah,
totally. Like understanding conflict at such a young age is super important, and how to deal with conflict in a real live situation instead of freezing or because when you're trying to sort something out in a boardroom at work or you're doing something, and I'm sure like as an actor you have the same thing where you have people that want to go one way with a scene and do something and somebody else wants to go another way. How do you resolve that conflict in a peaceful manner and come up with the right answer? You got to have both people working together but against each other. Like that's the way it has to be. And so like losing that is really dangerous, like you said. I mean, I don't like it at all, and that's why I didn't like this whole situation. But I do want to know because 11. What'd you say? 11 schools?
Yeah.
How did?
Changed school 11 times. There was one point where I actually like returned to a couple schools because we left an area and came back to an area. But yeah, changed schools 11 times.
What happened? So this is an interesting thing, like thought from me because you do talk like you're very articulate. You're good at explaining things, and your Instagram lives, like you'll sit there and talk, and I'll watch them. I'm like, I never watch Instagram lives that much, and I go, man, like I don't even know what he's talking about right now. He's interesting, like you're very good at it. So I wonder if those 11 schools and making different friends, having to make friends so quickly, because when you get older, that's got to be tougher, isn't it?
Oh, it's certainly tougher. Well, and this is also one of the things like as a kid, and maybe this might be different for boys or girls. So I don't know if this speaks to everybody, but it certainly was my experience, especially growing up, like lived a lot of the time. We moved around a lot in New England. And it's a pugnacious culture in general up there. Maine, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, live free or die. So, and I'm older now too. So punching each other in the face was not like that big of a deal. Like you didn't really get in that much trouble for it. So I made a ton of my friends in every new school. I mean, I was a new kid always, so I was constantly getting in fistfights. Like everything's like a prison in throughout grade school. Certainly up to about 7th or 8th grade, and people kind of like socialize because girls don't like dudes who like are constantly punching each other in the face. So that kind of helps. Sexual selection helps. But like grow like I made so many friends by punching kids in the face. Kids would pick on me. I was like, I knew the game. I was like, yo, no. First, it's just like those prison movies. Like first day, you find the biggest, toughest kid in the yard, and you hurt him. And I was like, so you would punch kids in the face, and then those would be my best friends for the entire time I lived there. So conflict and so like was never anything that I was really even taught to be afraid of or averse to. Now I got kicked out of 2 of those schools, so at some point, some people had some problems with my conflict ready disposition. But in terms of like making friends and stuff, like, and this is the same for romantic relationships as well. Like, no, you know how to fight. If you fight early and often, like obviously not to trying to hurt each other, but if you can figure out how to do what you're talking about, like how to render that conflict in a way that can kind of get disruptive, but it's still productive ultimately. I mean, those are the best friendships in your life. That's like family. You know what I mean? I mean, that's how I scrap with my family. That's why I scrap with my friends. That's how I scrap with my wife. I've never attacked my wife physically, but we certainly have had quite a few verbal arguments. But our ability to do so really is what renders like a very true, mutually accountable friendship, right? Because you've kind of been through it, you know you'll survive it. And you're like, all right, it gives you a sense of mutual respect and understanding for one another. And you're like, all right, let's team up.
Yeah, let's see. That's exactly like let's team up on it. But I mean,
Yeah.
and it also helps to have somebody like I don't, I wouldn't know what it would be like. Like me and my wife are where we don't necessarily get in these like fights. Like, but
Yeah.
if I disagree with something, I say it. And I
Yeah.
don't have any sort of feelings of like I'm hurting her feelings or I'm going against her. But I figure she really wants to know what's going on in my head, what I think,
Yeah.
and if it's truthful of what we need to do in the situation. And
Yeah.
the same for her. She's uber honest with everything. If she's thinking it, it comes out of her mouth. And
Yeah.
then we resolve a lot of issues about like and past that we need to go down as adults and lead our kids and everything else
Yeah.
through this sort of management of the conflict management which between me
Yep.
and her and everything else. I couldn't
Yeah.
agree with you more.
Yeah, it's huge. It's huge to just have that, and that honestly, like knee jerk, fast response honesty is even more helpful than, and it can be harder. I find it harder with children. We probably get in more fights now that we have kids, just because those moments of being honest quickly are sometimes aren't always the best moments because you're constantly like kind of taking care of other people. And you're like, oh, let me hold on to this, and then you kind of leave it alone. You're like, let's just go to bed or whatever, and things can build up, and then things can bottle up and explode. But if you can, but I don't know who. This is one of the things about this time. I don't know who grew up in a place where it was productive to not have like reasonable and honest exchanges of concept, of idea, of here's nerding out, of even of difference of opinion. You know what I mean? Where people were at some point, maybe there's a cultural thing I missed in the places I did live, where people were taught that like you're kind of not supposed to fight. That's not how we do things. You know what I mean? You just kind of what's right, you do what's right, and you don't kick up a fuss about that. And you know what? If you got to swallow your pride sometimes to walk away, and then maybe that's, I don't know. I'm trying to somehow rationally put myself in a brain of like why people would be averse to open sharing of information. You know what I mean? Why people would be prone to this. And again, I've been over psychoanalyzing it lately, but again, it's kind of, that's the actor side, right? I mean, I know it's cliche and I'm not particularly a method actor, but like what's your motivation? Like why are you doing this? Like I want to truly understand people. I want to understand the like schizophrenic homeless dude who sounds somewhere between like a Deadwood Shakespeare riff and just like a profane monster. I want to know what's going on in his mind. I want to know every, you know what I mean? From the least understandable mind to the most easily elucidated mind. I really want to kind of figure this out. And of course, I have the false hope, I think, that if I figure it out, that's going to give me the tool. And then I'll know exactly how to help unlock people from their sort of tightness, you know? But I don't know how they got there. What's their backstory? Like what makes people like that?
Have you always had this sort of thinking in your mind? Like, did you know have you always been drawn to the actor stuff, like the acting stuff, but the figuring out, like looking through other people's eyes?
Oh, for sure. I mean, my mom was a theater actress like before I was born. So I don't know if I sort of just inherited a little bit of that. And my dad switched from being like an environmental artist, kind of like an Andy Goldsworthy-ish stuff, where he would do like mylar rivers in the middle of the forest and take pictures of it. Or at one point he did like almost like a plaster cast of a city street and then made a rubber like thing out of it and brought it into an art gallery. So there was like a full city street with manhole covers that you could kind of like. So he did a lot of that stuff, and then he transitioned into filmmaking when I was like 4 or 5 years old. So I've been acting pretty much my whole life in some form or another, you know. So I've wanted to do that since I was 4 years old. And then I think moving a lot too puts you in that position where you come into a new spot and you're kind of like, again, to make it a prison metaphor, you're in the yard and you're literally like, all right, what are all the groups? You know what I mean? I didn't go to a lot of school with like those sort of like 80s, 90s, whatever, like teen movie lunchroom scenes. But it's kind of like that, where you come in and you're kind of like trying to survey the landscape, figure out how you fit in, figure out like what's the vibe, but like what are the behaviors. And then once you have the behaviors, you're like, oh, that reminds me of my other friend. And oh, I can kind of see that, you know, you just kind of make those associations to kind of figure out people in that way. And then acting is very much the same thing, right? You kind of like read it on the page, then you start looking around the world, and you kind of say, well, who's like that? You might even just see someone on the street. And then for me, it's always like you move like that person, and then you start learning who they are by moving like them, you know?
Yeah.
And so in some ways, I'm just like, I wish if I could just get everyone improv training, then they would just be able to really figure this stuff out instead of be fighting in front of a courthouse or in front of a school's like elementary school. We just need to learn how to like flow with each other and figure it out. And just you be like me for a while and I'll be like you, which is one of the great things about online, even arguing, which I get into. But I was like, you get to hear everyone's input and kind of try on their ideas for a while. You know what I mean? And take everything that they say and kind of fit it on you, and you're like, nope, that doesn't fit. You know, you get to, and I think that's really kind of wonderful. It's like a super helpful thing for particular people types. Obviously, some people are just like, I don't have the time to argue with you, and I don't like arguing at all. You know? so just do what I say. You know.
So just do what I say. I'm right. Yeah. You're wrong in this decision. But then if you say, no, I don't think so, and just leave it, they come back because we cannot leave it at no, you're not right.
Yes, exactly.
Go on forever.
Yes. No, I know. And then they're going to drop the let's agree to disagree, which I never agree to. I stopped agreeing to that 10 years ago. Let's agree to disagree. So wait, so you're going to dictate the terms of surrender here is what you're doing. I was like, that doesn't make any sense. Like what war has ever been adjudicated? Then that basically just means you won the war. So you're dictating the entire terms of surrender. We're going to agree. You say we're going to agree to disagree. No. That doesn't make any sense.
You would be a terrible person to disagree with online, just from the amount of information that you can start spewing out in the way that you articulate. Like, I'm never winning this argument ever.
Yeah, well, and in some cases to my detriment, where like, and again, this is one of the fights I had today with my wife, where she was talking about like, you know, that like at some point you get into the mode, I get into the mode, and I get a little wolfish about it, and I kind of enjoy it. I get a little mean face and a little smiling, and I'm like, oh, okay, let's do this then. And I get excited, kind of amps me up, where I'll try to win an argument, and I don't even know, not that I don't know that I'm right, but it's like I'm so intense on trying to like just kind of rearrange and destroy the argument that sometimes I'm like, well, what if I'm wrong? What if I'm just what if I'm better at arguing than this person and I have more evidence, so then I can feel safe in it at least, but what if I'm wrong? And I feel like sometimes I forget that, but I feel like that's a pretty healthy thing for my brain. And I'm going to throw that out to the whole world as life advice. Always ask yourself that. Could I be wrong? Right? That's helpful all the time, right? Not
I
just
think
not
that's what
just
I think that's what we were
yeah,
talking about. Like when the people
yeah,
were standing up there talking about the mask and they want to put it on your children. Like,
yeah,
what if they just thought for a second through some other thing? Like, what if I'm wrong? Like,
yeah,
I'll say this. Like, I got into somebody posed the question to me about masks a long time ago, and I had just got on Twitter because I was trying to promote the podcast, and I'm like,
yeah,
Twitter is a crazy dumpster fire of entertainment that is, it's going 1,000 miles an hour all the time. It's wild, but
yeah.
I realized by making a comment, I'm laughing, and I'm like, these people can't tell that I'm laughing on the other side of a keyboard. But
Um,
um, it was a professor that had actually done like worked with like trying to put studies together on masks and things, because
yeah,
my whole question was about it, and it started this whole crazy thing of people calling me names and killing grandma. Was
yeah,
how do you know everybody's not already wearing the mask?
yeah,
Like how do you gauge? I want to know if how do you get the tangible numbers that you're saying that the masks are the reason? How do you get those numbers? Where do they come from? And
yeah,
how do you know that the people in our town are not already like all wearing masks, or the majority? Like how do you know? And the guy who's like, he goes, well, we don't really. We're using models and guesses from a certain year of this, and just like some polls. And I go,
yeah.
it's impossible. Like I knew the answer to my question. It was, it's impossible to be able to gauge whether an entire city or town is wearing masks.
Yeah, to figure out that. I mean, it's honestly, it's possible to do, not with the whole city, but it's like with mass amounts of people, and it's super expensive. It is so like the huge RCTs. There's a preprint one that came out of Bangladesh, and it's like, I mean, it's like tens of thousands of people, right? All these villages, and they literally had people. You had to like hire people to go in. There's self-reporting stuff, which is a lot of it, and then you're like, okay, so here you go. That's what you got. You can kind of constantly ask, but monitors actually went into the village, and we kind of go to meetings or even mosques or whatever, and then like kind of literally kind of do a tally. I was like, that's the kind of intensity. And you're like, are there mask monitors wandering throughout Kansas to really observe this while you do your Kansas-based study? And they're like, eh. And once you start to realize, I mean, to me, this is a thing I just kind of learned about science, was like, but it plays in with logic, that it was like those kind of modeling studies are like low on the hierarchy of scientific evidence. And they're low as you think about it logically, right? For a reason. You're like, oh, well, because it's just like, that's a whole bunch of guesses. That's a lot of guesswork. And you literally can type a thing into a computer and you're like, well, it says it worked. And you're like, oh, cool. But in your equation, your model, like, what did you put in anything to do with like mask efficacy? And they're like, yeah, we put like 20 to 50%. And you're like, okay, where's that number come from? They're like, well, we did some studies in a laboratory where we had people breathe into a thing, and then we got a readout. We sort of measured the particles that came out, and so we just used it based on the sort of particulate matter from a study. So it was like, oh, so with a study with a human, you're saying the masks are effective, but what you're programming the masks modeling to do is to reduce infections 20 to 50% is what your model does. But you don't know that. You just know it's 20 to 50% of reduction of material, right? Of sort of filtration efficacy. So I was like, wait a second. So that's a guess, and then another guess, and a guess built on a guess from a guess that you made. And I was like, okay, well that's barely even scientific at all. That, even just from a reasonable perspective, like I don't need to have a degree to be like, okay, that doesn't make a lot of sense, that you're telling me that's very reliable information. And in fact, like you're saying, it's like, okay, well, so it's not even real too, right? This is your guess. You haven't actually even taken the guess into the real world and tested the guess. You know what I mean? Test the hypothesis.
Yeah.
Just sort of science 101 style. So it's why it's, yeah, but all of that to say, that's a very legitimate question. This is a very normal thing to chase down. But trying to chase down very legitimate questions on Twitter is next to impossible. That's literally that's like wandering into, I don't know, I imagine like Sturgis, right? Sturgis, it's 4 a.m. You literally wander into a camp, of this sort of like camp with like fires and a lot of drunk biker dudes, and you wander in talking about your little Miata moped, and say it's a sweeter hog than theirs. You know what I mean? Like, to them, that's what it sounds like. And then someone's going to try to kick your ass constantly on Twitter. It's maniacal. I think it's wonderful because you can literally go to like, here's the professor of epidemiology from University of San Diego. You can literally just go to that guy on Twitter and be like, I don't understand this. Did they use this, this, and this? Send. I mean, how cool is that?
It's awesome. Yeah.
I mean, people used to have to like get on, you think about whatever, enough hundreds of years ago, people would have to like get on a ship and like travel 4 months across the ocean to go ask someone in Oxford a question, right? And now we literally can be like, literally taking a poop and being like, beep, 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 send. Let's hope he answers me. Meanwhile, 3 people are like, what do you know about it, jackass? You know what I mean? Or whatever. People are ready. People are just there to like kick your ass in the professor's virtual office or whatever.
While he's teaching, and then he comes back to just like a
yes, exactly. Scream of thing. Yeah, I actually got one. There was like a epidemiologist lady. I actually got to respond to me. I'd asked her a bunch of questions a bunch of times. Some of them were challenges because I was like, hold on a second. I've read enough about that I don't understand what you were basing this on. I want to know, but I'm also challenging you. And she would never respond. Finally, like I had asked her a question, and then this person had been angry at me on another thread, followed me to this thread, and just immediately insulting. Immediately throwing ad hominems. And because that guy was such a jerk, she like DM'd me and she's like, oh, I'm sorry that guy was so mean. I was like, that was a legit question. I actually got my question answered. So in some ways, if you can get beat up enough in front of the right person, you can kind of catch their attention, you know? It's kind of like, again, it's like in one of those, I keep comparing to romantic situations, but like, it's like in one of those movies when the bully beats you up and then the girl you really like comes over and she's like helping like put a stake on your eye. And you're like, hey, this worked out okay for me. I just had to take a few lumps.
Yeah. That's usually the way we have to do everything. Like you have to take your lumps before you get some success in life.
Before you get anywhere. So just may as well get used to it now. Just stock up on steaks, man.
Just stock up on steaks. But the like oh, excuse me.
Yeah.
That asking those questions like about the mask and where all that like the trying to find out and make sense of an issue that doesn't make sense. And you've started to like, I guess that's what made it so interesting to see you like where do you think or why do you think that school boards like have such adamant like where do they make their decision? How do they come up with them? And then why is this the catch-all?
Yeah, it's a weird thing. So I have actually been in like email Congress, and then we did a Zoom meeting or whatever with my local sort of school board representative for the elementary school my children go to. So I was able to ask her some questions, and I went to the school board meeting when they kind of voted on it. My best understanding is, well, almost nobody was prepared for a pandemic. CDC, FDA, White House, flipping nobody, dude. Not that I don't even know if they were asleep at the wheel. They're like, well, we had a preparation thing in plan, but it was canceled in the previous administration. So, whatever. There's all that stuff. I don't know. I don't know if that plan was that great either. And I've read plans by ACLU. The 2006, I think they started. Academics were talking about lockdowns. Lockdowns were a terrible idea. We did those anyway. The Great Barrington Declaration. It was like 40,000 scientists were like, let's not do lockdowns. They went and did them anyway. You know what I mean? So like nobody's paying any attention. No one was ready for this. And I think school boards, just like everybody else, freaked out. And I think maybe this might be just how they're used to solving things. They just like pay for some sort of consulting firm about anything that they don't know what they're doing, which in some ways is good, right? You can sort of outsource what you're not good at. Now, if you can't outsource your thinking, and I feel like that's where the major error has come here. So at least that's what happened where I am in North Carolina. There's a place called the ABC Science Collaborative, I think, or Collective, something like that, who they basically was hired by the state to sort of be their COVID consultants. So whenever I asked people, I was like, well, what evidence anyone has ever been able to tell me? Well, we got our, we're getting our guidance from the ABC. They just passed the buck, because that's how a lot of government bureaucracy works. They just have a bunch of consultants and managers and, 17 people to do, 4 people's jobs kind of thing. So they pass the buck pretty much. And they're like, they're just going to tell us what to do. So then that takes flack off of us. If people don't like what we do, we just go, well, that's what they said. Also, they're called Science Collective. So that seems fancy. There's also a bunch of doctors there. So we just did what the doctor said, which I've been realizing more and more is like people's like real thing that they're like, well, consult with your doctor and then make your decision. You're like, you just mean your doctor's going to tell you what to do? Because that's weird too. It's nice to get advice. They're doctors who are nerds, right, of certain types, and you get advice from them, and factor that into your own thinking. But there seems to be this thing of just like, they told us what to do, that's what we're going to do. I'm the wrong person to tell that thing to. So I literally went to the ABC Science Collective website, and I was like, well, look I clicked on the FAQ. Here's 7 things they said on this one site that are fully not true. There's some things that don't even pass the logic test. Like this, they said this after this, and then they refuted this thing down here, that sort of thing. And I was like, I don't know why you're listening to them, first of all. Second of all, them telling you something real is not scientific evidence. I think, honestly, we have a scientific literacy problem in school boards, but in general, that people think that, like, and the newspapers present it this way too, that experts say. So if an expert says, okay, you know what I mean? There we go, we're done. And you're like, no, science very specifically puts that at the very bottom. That's the least relevant thing that you could make a decision on, because they know their scientists came up with a scientific hierarchy. They're like, we know we're constantly wrong. That's literally science's whole gig, to be wrong. Check it out. Oh, you're wrong. Check it out. You're wrong. Check it out. You're wrong. Constantly changing presuppositions. I mean, science has swung this way and that on just about anything but some of the most fundamental aspects of observed reality, right? And that's the fun of it. I mean, how cool is that? You're constantly like, oh, like the joy of discovery. But the school system's not set up for it. I honestly don't think journalism traditionally is really set up to understand how to reference science, because journalism is like based on like, get a quote from this person and this person. Then you synthesize those. And there you go, world. That's what it's talking to people. And we want to talk, as we've talked about. But I think that's been the problem with school boards, is they have no internal framework on like what they're supposed to do. So they just go, tell us what to do. And then that's it. That's it. And that's all. And in some degree, that's all they need, I guess.
Yeah. And then they just follow that. That makes sense. That makes sense. You know what, as you're talking to me about all these different things, what is so wonderful, like, you can say wonderful and the positive that's come out of something like this pandemic, and and if you want to flip it on its head and say the positive of everybody being split and getting angry is that people like yourself, and there's more of you, I do the same thing, but I don't think that I've got more educated than in the last 2 years on my own will of like trying to figure out what is correct. So like, we've spent more time looking at our health and what actually benefits us, and like studying these things. Like, look at all the things and knowledge that you have and the way you explain the school board right there. Like, could you have done that 5 years ago?
No, I would have no framework to even begin. No, this last 2 years has been like a cram session, and people are like, oh, you're doing your own research. And I was like, dude, I'm unemployed, first of all, and I have an autoimmune disease, so I'm on the toilet like anywhere from 12 to 14 times a day. Not super fun. But one of the great things is that's plenty of time to do research, y'all. So I was like, I've put in work, and we've all put in work. And since I had an autoimmune disease, I did the same thing you're talking about early on. I was like, I probably had 2 or 3 days where I was a little nervous about COVID, maybe in like March. Maybe somewhere mid-March. It was like 4 days. I was like, oh gosh, it's a little scary. And then you got to live life. So you can't live in that, and you can't really process. Your brain doesn't work that great if you're in a state of fear. So it's really good for running or fighting. That's pretty much it. So fight or flight. And I was like, well, no, I want to live my life. You know what I mean? I want to use my brain. It's fun. But then after that, I was just like, yeah, let me figure out how to get my immune system as strong as I can then. I mean, the problem is my immune system is sort of too strong and it attacks my body. But I was like, let me at least get balance, right? And so I was like, let's figure out how to get healthy. And we have all this time to like cram. And it's one of the great things about fighting too online. One of the good things about having a fighting, I shouldn't use fighting because that reveals how I'm looking at it and how much I enjoy it. But like arguing online, like, especially when I get out of my depth by accident, because you know how Twitter is, you might say something and you're like, oh, I don't know, it seems more like this. And then people are like, oh yeah, well here's this, and they'll send 6 studies at you and you're like, oh dang, I was wrong. And I was like, okay, but am I wrong? So like I've had like 6 or 7 hour like internet arguments before, but they're crams. It's like cramming before an exam. Because then once you get caught up, you're like, all right, well, I better go prove myself right, or I better admit I'm wrong. You know what I mean? Or be like, oh, all right, you're right. Thank you for educating me. And then you get to walk away. But you like, I'm going to go find out first. So you cram, figure that out. You go check this out, cram that out. And that way it's been, I think, super helpful for the people who like to do that, who actually want to figure things out. I think honestly, and sometimes I get a little depressed about this. I do think maybe even the majority of people don't want to do that. They actually don't want to. It's going to stress them out. It's going to make them more anxious. It's going to make them feel like they have more to do. Kind of the more they know, the more like scary and existential it is. And if they stumble upon anything that makes them feel more unsteady, like we were talking about, you find out, oh, you're wrong. That puts some people in like an existential tailspin. And they're already like, I'm already scared. Everyone around me is scared. I don't understand what's going on. And then now I don't even know what I know and who I am anymore. You know what I mean? Then it's like, you're freaking popping antidepressants and doing mezcal shots and it's all
over. Well, I mean, this is the weird thing about it is like I'm sure people hear about Texas and they just go like, man, it's the Wild West. Like they're just doing whatever they want there and it's open and then people just walk in. I even hear when people start talking about this is seriousness. And then if you walk outside your door and you live your life on a daily basis, you would never know anything was wrong. Like you would never know that we were in a pandemic. You wouldn't know any of these things were happening. Like you wouldn't know people are fighting. You wouldn't, and that's where I've kind of based all my stuff. I was like, I have to bring myself to reality sometimes and go, when I step outside my door and I go do life, like actual life, and I work, everybody's just normal. Nobody, like it's amazing how if you just stop trying to force fix something that.
Yes.
It's just, hey, and like you said, we have to live our lives. Like we can't, you can exist or you can live. And there's two options there. And I don't want to exist. I want to live because, I'm already 40 years old. I'm like, okay, I need to still live while I have chances to live and do things.
I'm halfway done, I think. So
I'm getting close.
I better zoom in. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that is one thing about it. That's like, you really start to like understand and appreciate, life really isn't as bad as what I thought it was.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad to hear that as well. Cause I can get lost. I literally spend too much time online. I try to do as much helpful stuff on there as I can, but like, again, I am unemployed and I'm on the toilet a lot. So, and every time I'm like, all right, well, let me find some more stuff and share it with people and like do what I can to analyze it. And I was like, whatever skills I have to like, that are like, I don't know, that are useful for this time. Right. Yeah. I'm pretty good at critical thinking, for better or worse. I'm kind of a critical person, pretty good at like textual analysis from a lifetime, pretty decent at understanding people. And I've got a fast enough mind to be able to like read and process information and pull out some key stuff and let people know. And so I'm just like, all right, as many ways as I can help. And to me, it's so funny. I've gotten a little self-involved, I think, in that way. And that I'm like, well, as long as I keep living as impeccably as I possibly can, as forthright as I possibly can, then that to me is almost my place of balance. Because out here, it's not, I'm in North Carolina and it's not as copacetic out in the world. I definitely I get, now it's partially me. I'm definitely ready and willing to like verbally scrap about whatever needs to be scrapped about. But since it's been a pretty locked down place, we're not kind of like, I have friends in LA who are like, people yell at people outside there. Like if you were walking your dog and you're walking your dog and you don't have a mask on, they're like, oh yeah, people do that all the time. They're like, oh yeah, on my street, people would be walking their dog. People would be like, mask. So I was like, I don't live there anymore. So that's cool. It's not happening to that level here, but I certainly have been, asked to leave, a furniture place because the type of mask I was wearing. I rock a luchador mask a lot of time. I've had trouble getting into like, I'm not a person, I've never thrown any bows or whatever, but there's literally like conflicts out in the world to be had here as well. So it's funny. It's this right now, it's kind of, I feel like calmed down a little bit where people are a little bit more like lapsed into like a libertarian thing where it's kind of like, do this if you want to, don't do this if you don't want to a little bit, which is nice. Cause then it just feels like, okay, but there's a heavy tension in the air here. So, but it's nice to hear. I mean, this is kind of, some people look at Texas and Florida both and are like, oh, this, like, we can't let our country turn into that. And then there's like, as far as I know, there's a ton of people who are like, oh, I wish I lived in Texas or Florida. Seems like you can just like live there and thrive there. So you telling me that like you can walk out and just kind of be normal, you don't have to run into like tense and weird people, is like, I mean, it sounds delightful. It sounds delightful to me.
Well, here's the truth about Florida. I've
Yeah,
been on vacation there twice since
yeah.
all this stuff and all the
I lived there for a while.
wackiness.
Yeah,
I expected to see nobody wearing masks, parties up and down the street, like people going crazy. No, there's actually more people wearing masks in Florida than they wear in Texas. I promise. Like
yeah,
that's
yeah,
what I saw over there was totally different. But they're all free to do whatever they want, how they want to do it, and nobody is butting into people's face. It's
yeah.
totally normal life, other than like, okay, that person has a mask on and I don't, and you can walk in here and we can be friends. Like, hey, Mr. Mask Man, like we're friends.
Yes.
That's cool. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
we are friends. Okay, see you later. You know,
Yep.
and you move about your day. So the misconception also about Florida is that it's just this like wild, like
Yeah.
unruly thing. Like, no, they're actually like a lot of people, like wearing the mask and doing the things you want them to do there.
Yeah, yeah, which is so funny too, because of course it's constantly gets like lambasted. You're like, look, they don't do anything, and that's why. And I was like, well, I was in Tampa. They had a mask mandate wherever I went. Like in the Whole Foods, they were like, they had a mask at the door because I wasn't wearing one, and I was like, oh, I thought Florida was no, it isn't. All right, whatever. So I was like, no, there are a lot of places they're doing the dang things, and it's still not working. Maybe it's because there's it's like the third or fourth oldest state. You know what I mean? Things hit harder on old people. You know, seasonality is a huge thing. Like again, let's stop looking for reasons about how things are going bad for other people because they're not like you. You know, let's go ahead and let's set that down. Wait, where in Texas are you at?
I live in College Station.
Where's that? Where's it? What's it? Is it close to?
It's kind of like it's like right in between Austin and Houston. It's like I'm
Okay.
an hour and
Yep.
pretty much an hour and 30 minutes away from both the places.
Okay. I think that helps too, being out of a full on like fat city center.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, that definitely helps.
Yeah.
It's a big town, but also at the same time it's like a small town as well.
Yeah.
So
If
that
people,
helps out a lot.
yeah, if people have good, man, I'm telling you, like if people got a little elbow room, I think everyone's a little more relaxed. I feel like people in tight quarters with one another, all of a sudden you start being like, you better act right. You better, you know what I mean? You like, it gets a little squirrely with people when you're around. Because again, I thought Austin was going to be like, I was like, oh my gosh, what a classically like liberal town. So I was like, they're going to let people like let their freak flag fly, right? Keep Austin weird. I was like, they're going to let weirdos do whatever they want. And then I was like, from everything that people I know in Austin, I was like, oh no, they are locked down. People are in their houses. Like people are masked up. I got my first blocked. I got blocked on Instagram for the first time by a business in Austin I've followed for years because I used to go there kind of every summer for a music festival, the Austin City Limits Music Festival. I went for years and years. And then I was like, oh, Austin isn't weird. I was like, oh no. And I had that same framework like in my head where I was like, oh, I had to let go of my libertarian assumptions of what was happening. And I know Austin is like classically, I mean, it's funny, they're like the liberal bastion in some ways, right, of the state to some degree. But I guess it's more, maybe they're even more democratic now than they are liberal, which I think are honestly, I think conservatives are the new liberals in terms of just ideology. And a lot of people say the classic liberal. And I was like, I don't know when it got classic on it. I don't feel that old, man.
When you said that, you actually said that on one post, and I was like, man, that's actually kind of true if you have to look at it. And really, like, I guess, I don't know if you want to call them libertarians or whatever. Yeah, they're more of the liberal type of thing. Like, I mean, being liberal, you're wanting more freedom for people to express themselves and do certain things, not put boxes around people. And then, so the liberals, or the people who claim to be liberals, and when you said that, I went down that thing like, yeah, that's right. The people who are claiming to be liberals and want freedom for all these people and all these things are putting people in boxes, and they're telling you have to stay inside this box or you're a bad person. And then, even the Republican people on this side, there's some of those people that are like doing the same thing, and they're putting people in boxes, and you go like, what? How is this? And then you have people that in the conservative party that have branched away and want more freedom for everybody. And you go,
Yeah.
when did it make a big circle of just like, huh?
I know. I was like, and I know people always talk about like I'm not, again, not super into politics. My dad was a like a political consultant in for like make commercials basically for Dukakis's campaign when he ran for president,
Oh,
for
wow.
John Kerry when he ran for senator, a bunch of anyway. He did that. Him and his wife and his one partner, they made commercials for politicians. So my first job, actually, I think when I came to LA, was working for him, and I was transcribing like Al Gore's. Sort of like pre-recorded speech at the Democratic National Convention. So I've been around like adjacent to politics stuff my whole life. So in that punk rock next generation style, no interest, don't care, lame, no way, boring, you know. And so really just to come to it now, you know, I've heard throughout my life of how like, oh, they're, you know, of course, for years, the Democrats were pretty much like the worst party. They were the party of segregation. They were the part, you know what I mean? They were the worst people. And the Republicans were the ones for years, trying to free slaves and trying to work against Jim Crow and blah, blah, blah. And somewhere in the 60s or 70s, something flip-flopped, you know, is the narrative. And then now, so either it all has now kind of flip-flopped again, where there's a new ideology being embraced by the Democratic Party to where, yeah, you have to think this way and you have to do these things. And if you don't do these things, you're not doing the right thing. You're not being an American or whatever. I don't know, whatever the language would be. So either it's flip-flopping again, or I don't know enough about it. I was like, what if the flip never happened? Like, what if in some ways, like I was just focusing for years on the things about Democrats that I liked, that were more like I think there's more like overt conscientiousness towards people, especially anybody who's struggling, suffering. That's something I've always just liked about the Democratic Party. I'm a registered independent. I've never voted for a winning president in my life. I'm that kind of voter.
That's awesome.
So, never picked a single winner. One of these days. But no, I've always liked that about the Democrats. But I was like, well, but maybe they were as ideologically insular as I always sort of accused the Republicans of being, because I paid very little attention to it, honestly. So a lot of it I was absorbing from my super Democratic dad, or like news media stuff, which can kind of tends to slant one direction anyway. So again, I'm a newbie to politics stuff. So all I know is that everybody's a liar.
Yes, you've already figured it out. I can't remember if it's you that posted it. Somebody posted it where it was a thing saying like there is no politics. Like take the word politics out and just look at the human being and the idea.
Yeah, that was not me, but I'm down for that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what I would want, because now you're not trying to sell me anything. I want to know your ideas and your thoughts, and I want to know if that human being has got like really good action behind it. And because you hear Democrat, you hear liberal, and you're like, oh, you're automatically going to be on this team funded by these people, X, Y, and Z. And then you're like, but what does it really mean? Like you're saying, did it never even change? Like it may have never changed. It may just be a different narrative.
Yeah. I literally, and again, I'm happy to embrace and stay in that position as long as I can. On most things, I don't know. I just really don't know. And that's been helpful to me too, because I can tend towards in the past, less so in the last like 10 years of my life, but like being a know-it-all at different times in my life, especially like probably as like a punk, like late high school, like early college kid. But this past 2 years has been a great lesson plan of like looking out and seeing what it's like to see a bunch of know-it-alls who literally, when you start pushing them, know nothing at all. Then I'm like, oh, dang, I don't, how odious is that? It kind of grosses me out, and I don't want to be that. You know, I don't want to fall back into that. I want to stay in the world of, I don't know, as often as possible, right? I mean, that was like Socrates, right? The wisest man in Greece, because he was the man who said that he admitted that he knew nothing. You're like, okay, I can stay Socrates genius. I can stay like that. If the whole gig is like, I don't know, all right. It's hard. It's hard. Yeah. It's hard to stay there for me, but like it's a healthy thing, seeing how ugly it can be to not be that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, Brendan, this has been so much fun, dude. I can't it's really exciting to get to talk to you and to have you on the podcast and to share your thoughts and stuff. Like I've had a blast, man.
Yeah, it's fun, man. Isn't it fun just kind of bouncing stuff around? Just talking to people. It's so helpful.
Yes, yes. Anytime you
Yeah.
want to talk, man, you can just hit me up, and you can ring me up on FaceTime, whatever. It's
Thanks,
good.
man.
If
Thank
you
you.
need adults to talk to, it's good. I've got lots of windshield time, and it works good with me. So,
Oh, fantastic, man.
yeah.
Thank you,
I
brother.
guess let everybody know where they can find. Well, I've got your Instagram thing. Is that's the best place to follow you? The Fireball McNamara.
Yeah, just leave me alone on Twitter, man. All I'm doing is getting in trouble over there. I don't need you. I don't need you to see that, man. I don't need you to see that at all. Yeah, yeah. Just you can find me on Instagram for now, or to promote myself as an actor. If you have Amazon Prime, well, first of all, shame on you for filling Jeff Bezos' pockets with even more money he doesn't need. I'm also a subscriber, so I'm accusing myself at the same time, just so you know. But on Amazon Prime, I'm on a show called Loudermilk. So watch me on Loudermilk, and then check me out on
Okay,
Instagram.
I love Will Sasso. Obviously, he's
Yeah,
hilarious.
yeah,
And
yeah,
what's the guy? So I'm terrible with the names. But
yeah, yeah,
the guy who plays the main character, Loudermilk, in there,
yeah. Ron Livingston.
hilarious. Yeah,
Yeah, dude.
Ron Livingston. That's right. Yeah,
He's solid.
like that show. I like. I watched some of the newer seasons, and I
Yeah,
was like, this show is absolute. I didn't know that I would like it as much as I did. It's absolutely
yeah,
hilarious
yeah.
with
It's really
the
funny and
writing and
sweet.
everything.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's got a
What
heart. It's got a heart too.
Yeah, what I guess what episodes are you in? Because I definitely have to go back and find these
Oh
episodes.
yeah, yeah. I'm in season one. I kind of pop in like episode five, and then I'm kind of the B story to like episode nine, 10. So I'm basically in the second half of that first season. I pop back up in the third season. They brought me back in. But yeah, I'm like the kind of main B story of that first season.
The first and third season. Okay, I gotta go
Yeah,
check it out because
I'm in there. I'm in there, man.
that's so awesome that like one, I mean, and you got to work with those guys, which is crazy.
Yeah,
That
dude.
cast
Dude,
is wild.
oh, it's awesome. Dude, it's the Farrelly brothers, man. Which I mean, at least to me, like Kingpin is one of my probably like top 10 favorite comedies of all time. And so like getting to work with them was like pretty nerdy, fantastic, awesome. And they're not afraid of broad comedy, which I enjoy getting. I enjoy broadening out, getting a little ridiculous. So it was super fun.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Well, I'm definitely going to be paying attention to the other stuff you're in the future. Hopefully, you will be employed very soon.
I would like to, man. Yeah, please tell the whole world.
We'll do it, man. Brendan, thanks a lot for being on, man.
Thank you, brother. Have a good night.